I knew something was wrong the moment my tires hit that dirt road. The air felt too heavy, too still, like the woods were holding their breath. And when the trees opened up, my cabin was gone, flattened, smoke drifting across the clearing like a ghost that didn't know where to settle. Then I spotted it, my 20-year service watch lying in the mud. I stepped toward it, and the bulldozer rolled forward and crushed it right in front of me. The guy on the dozer laughed, leaned out the window, and shouted, "Go ahead and sue us, old man." They thought I was powerless. They had no idea who I really was. I never planned on coming back to the mountains. Not after 2 decades in the fraud division of the Clark County Sheriff's Department. You spend that long chasing liars, thieves, and bureaucrats in shiny shoes, and eventually the world starts feeling small, tight, like a hallway closing in on you. So, when I walked out of the department for the last time, badge and gun turned in, I promised myself one thing: find a quiet place where no one could reach me. That place turned out to be an old A-frame cabin tucked deep into Redwood Creek, a patch of pines and cold air about a mile outside the border of the Redwood Crest HOA. I bought it from the Lancaster family, ranch folks who had held the property for generations. The deed was clean, old school, and beautifully simple. Private land, not HOA, not shared, not disputed, exactly the kind of place a tired man could breathe. The first morning I stepped onto that porch, the mountain air felt like a reset button. Cool, still, not a single voice telling me what to do. I remember thinking, maybe I'll actually write that damn book now, but peace doesn't last long around people who think a clipboard gives them power. The first problem showed up on my second visit. I was driving in with coffee when a white SUV with a Redwood Crest security decal swung across the road and blocked my way. The guy who stepped out wore mirrored sunglasses and a cheap polyester uniform. But before he even opened his mouth, my instincts kicked in. I didn't look at his face first. Cops never do. I checked his hands, empty, then his belt, radio, flashlight, maybe pepper spray, no firearm, threat level, low. He didn't greet me, didn't even pretend. Just barked, "Sir, may I see your resident permit?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. Resident permit for what? For Redwood Crest HOA. All residents and guests must present authorization. "I'm not in Redwood Crest," I said. "My property ends at parcel E971. Bought it from the Lancaster family." He frowned like I'd said something offensive. "Do you have paperwork on you?" I opened the glove box and handed him the deed. He studied it, flipping it over twice, hoping to find a mistake. But there wasn't one. The deed was ironclad. He knew it. His jaw tightened as he handed it back. "This will be noted," he muttered. "By who?" I asked. He didn't answer, just stared at my license plate long enough to memorize it, then walked back to his SUV. He drove away slowly, too slowly, watching me in the rearview mirror. I'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone who'd decided I was a problem to solve. The next morning, after picking up supplies, I returned to the cabin and found a crisp sheet of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. No header, no signature, just one bold line. Unauthorized structures are subject to community review. Community, right. Redwood Crest's community ended a full mile before my land ever began. But intimidation rarely cares about boundaries. I didn't panic. I knew the game. Bullies don't bluff once. They test, push, escalate. And Redwood Crest wasn't warning me. They were taking inventory. At the time, I didn't know just how far they were willing to go. But looking back now, the security guard's stare, that fake notice, the slow rumble of something bigger building under the surface, I should have known. They weren't preparing for a conversation. They were preparing for a takeover. A takeover that would begin with a bulldozer and end with handcuffs. I tucked that warning notice into my jacket and tried to focus on the repairs I'd planned for the day. But once a man's instincts start whispering, it's hard to ignore them. The next Saturday, I drove up before sunrise. Fog clung low across the road, sliding between the trees like something alive. The farther I drove, the heavier the air felt, like the mountain was waiting for something to happen. When I reached the clearing, I parked and made a slow walk around the property. The old steel boundary rods were still exactly where they'd been for decades. I checked each one twice, straight, unmoved, locked perfectly with the county maps. There was no confusion. Redwood Crest wasn't guessing. They were lying. I circled farther back toward the tree line and found something new, something out of place. A cigarette butt, Marlboro Red, strong, cheap, and heavy. The kind labor crews and hired muscle smoke, not the kind of stick a Redwood Crest resident would let touch their manicured fingers. I crouched down and studied the soil indentation next to it. Fresh, maybe a few hours old. Someone had stood here watching the cabin, watching me. Nothing I could call in, but enough to confirm that this wasn't random. Around mid-morning, I went back to fixing the window screens. The steady rhythm of the screwdriver helped settle my nerves, for a while at least. Then I heard it, the slow crunch of gravel. I stepped out onto the porch and leaned against the railing. A black pickup with dark tint crept up the road. It stopped about 20 yards away. Engine idling. The windows didn't roll down, door didn't open, just silence. Most folks would have called out or waved. I didn't. I just lifted my phone slowly, deliberately, like I was taking a picture of the license plate. Those few seconds stretched thin. The truck jolted, just slightly, then reversed fast, turned around, and sped off down the hill. Not neighborly behavior. Watching me, testing me, making sure I was alone, and now they were nervous. By early afternoon, the unease had settled deep enough that I decided to stop improvising and start preparing. I walked back to the truck, grabbed a small box from the glove compartment, and pulled out something I had used more times than I could count on surveillance jobs. A motion-triggered HD camera, barely the size of a golf ball, but the trick wasn't the camera itself. It was the shell casing I kept it in, a hollowed-out fake bird's nest with a clay sparrow perched on top. From 10 feet away, you couldn't tell it from the real thing. From 2 feet away, most people still wouldn't guess. I mounted it high in the rafters, tucked deep into the beam where shadows pooled. Unless someone brought a ladder and knew exactly what they were looking for, they'd never find it. That camera would later record the moment everything in my life cracked open. But for now, it was just insurance. Late afternoon sun warmed the porch as I packed up to leave. That's when I saw it. A second notice under my windshield wiper. New wording this time. Failure to comply may result in enforcement actions. Enforcement. I let that word roll through my head. In law enforcement, you learn patterns. And intimidation in writing always follows the same escalation. First, a suggestion. Then, a warning. Finally, a threat dressed as procedure. I scanned the tree line again. The woods were quiet, but not peacefully so. More like something had ducked behind cover just before I turned my head. I folded the notice and added it to the first. Evidence belongs together. On my way down the mountain, dusk settled over the pines. The cold air pouring in through the open truck window sharpened my thoughts. They were watching me, testing how far they could push before I pushed back. People like Redwood Crest always made the same mistake. They thought a man living alone in the woods was easy prey, but they didn't know my history, didn't know the years I spent hunting fraudsters who thought they were smarter than the law, didn't know the kind of patience a seasoned investigator could carry. This wasn't random harassment, it was reconnaissance. And bullies who run reconnaissance only do it for one reason. They're planning something bigger. I didn't sleep well the entire week. Not because of fear stopped working on me years ago, but because every instinct I had kept whispering the same thing. They're not done. When you've spent 2 decades dealing with fraudsters, bullies, and paper pushers who think they're emperor of a cul-de-sac, you learn to recognize the pattern. Quiet isn't the end of trouble. Quiet is the breath people take before they do something stupid. By Friday evening, I'd packed a small overnight bag and headed back up the mountain. I told myself it was to finish repairs, but that wasn't the truth. Truth was, I wanted to see what Redwood Crest did when they thought no one was watching. I reached the cabin just after sunset. The sky had turned that deep purplish blue you only get in the mountains, and the pines were black silhouettes against the last light. The air felt heavy, damp, like something was waiting. I unlocked the cabin, set my bag inside, then took a slow walk around the property with a flashlight. No new tire tracks, no fresh footprints, nothing obvious, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt held, like the woods were listening. I checked the fake bird's nest camera I'd installed the week before, perched high in the rafters of the porch, shadowed perfectly. The tiny LED blinked once, still working, still watching. I sat down on the porch with a cup of coffee, keeping the lights off. Light blinds you. Darkness helps you see. Hours passed quietly, except for the occasional groan of the cabin settling as nighttime temperatures dropped. By 11 p.m., The cold had started biting through my jacket. Then, a crack, a branch snapping somewhere in the tree line. Not the wind, not an animal, a footstep. I stayed perfectly still. Movement attracts attention. Stillness makes you vanish. Another footstep, soft, measured, deliberate. Then a flash, just a split-second glow, like someone cupping a phone screen in their hand. Somebody was out there, watching me, studying the cabin. I shifted silently behind a porch pillar, keeping my silhouette hidden. The footsteps stopped. Whoever it was had good instincts. They sensed the change. For 30 long seconds, nothing moved. Then the figure backed away into the trees, not stumbling, not running, retreating like someone who intended to come back later. I waited 2 full minutes before exhaling. Inside, I pulled up the live camera feed. Grainy, but good enough. I rewound and froze the frame when the figure stepped briefly into the moonlight. Tall, broad shoulders, baseball cap, work boots, gloves, not a neighbor, not a hiker, a scout, someone mapping the scene. I leaned back and let years of training process the pattern. This wasn't harassment. This was preparation. At 3:17 a.m., just as I drifted into a shallow sleep, my phone buzzed. Motion alert. I sat up immediately. There. A figure stepped onto the porch, moving slowly, confidently. He reached for the doorknob, tested it gently, then harder. The lock held. He leaned in close to the window, his face nearly touching the glass. And it hit me. He wasn't checking if the cabin was empty. He'd seen my truck outside. He knew I was here. He was checking if I was awake. A cold, quiet calculation passed through me. This wasn't random. He was assessing response time. He stayed there for several long seconds, then finally stepped back and walked off the porch with the same deliberate calm he arrived with. Not scared, not rushed, just done for the night. I saved the footage, backed it up, cataloged it. Date, time, angle, posture, stride, evidence before action, always. Dawn broke with a pale, tired light. I walked the property again. Nothing new, no movement, no more signs of intrusion. Everything looked calm, too calm. Around 9 a.m., I told myself a harmless little lie. They must have gotten spooked. They won't be back today. I needed more supplies anyway. Screws, brackets, a few boards. The hardware store was 30 minutes away. I climbed into the truck and drove off. Just another morning, just another errand. But while I was standing in line for a coffee refill, somewhere up that mountain, engines were already warming, gates were already opened, and heavy machinery was being waved through with forged documents. They hadn't retreated, they hadn't quit. They had simply waited. Waited for the one moment they knew I'd be gone. And by the time I turned back toward the mountain, my cabin was already gone. The road back up the mountain felt longer than usual that afternoon. Maybe it was the way the clouds had thickened while I was down in town. Or maybe it was that quiet sense in my chest, the kind you only earn after decades of arriving at crime scenes a few minutes too late. Around the last bend before the clearing, I felt it. Not heard it, felt it. A deep vibration through the steering wheel, like distant thunder buried under the earth. I eased off the gas. The vibration grew stronger. Then came the sound, a low, steady growl that every contractor, every farmer, every cop knows instantly. A bulldozer. My stomach didn't drop from fear, but from recognition. I rolled forward another few feet, and the trees opened. The sight hit me like a blunt instrument. My cabin, the place I'd been rebuilding board by board, morning by morning, was gone. Not damaged, not half collapsed. Gone, flattened, wiped off the face of the clearing. Dust drifted through the air in slow, ghostly curtains. Splintered beams stuck out of the ground like broken ribs. The roof was nothing but mashed plywood and twisted shingles. The foundation had been ripped open like something large had clawed its way out. And sitting dead center on the wreckage was a bright yellow bulldozer, engine rumbling, tracks smeared with wet earth. A work truck idled nearby. 3 men in reflective vests stood around pretending to read clipboards. I stepped out of my truck, one measured breath at a time, not angry, not panicked, just steady. The same kind of steady I used to be when walking into a house where something terrible had already happened. As my boots hit the ground, something metallic glinted in a patch of mud. I walked toward it. My 20-year service watch, thrown clear when the cabin came down, its strap torn, its face cracked, lying there like a relic from another life. I took a step toward it, and the bulldozer rolled forward, slow, intentional, right toward the watch. I froze, not from fear, but from the sheer pettiness of it. Crunch. 10 tons of steel crushed the watch into the mud. Metal snapped, glass powdered. The operator leaned out of the cab, laughing like it was a bar joke. "Go ahead and sue us, old man." My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed calm, calmer than it had any right to be. I lifted my phone and began recording. Who authorized this demolition? 2 of the workers shifted uncomfortably. The third, the foreman, judging by the clipboard, kept staring at the ground. "We were told." I stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "I didn't ask what you were told. I asked who signed the order." He swallowed. His fingers tightened around the manila folder he was clutching. I said nothing, just held out my hand. Open, steady, unblinking. Real authority doesn't shout. It doesn't posture. It just stands there, the way only a man can after a lifetime of staring liars in the eye. Something in him cracked. He exhaled, shoulders sinking, and finally placed the folder into my palm. Inside was a flimsy demolition notice with a cheap printed seal. Redwood Crest Property Compliance Division. The plat map was a mess. Boundaries digitally stretched, file format mismatched, drag marks from rushed editing. A forgery made by someone who thought no one would ever check. And at the bottom, President Veronica Hale. So, she wasn't hiding her hand. Arrogance rarely does. I photographed everything. The machinery, the workers, the fake forms, the altered map, the signature, the truck plates, every boot print and tire track. A crime scene tells the truth to anyone who knows how to listen. The foreman cleared his throat. "Look, we're just doing the job they paid for." Another man added, "HOA gave us access through the west gate, told us everything was cleared." That was the detail I needed. Only someone with HOA authority could open that gate. I lowered my phone. "All of you need to leave, right now. If you're still here in 60 seconds, I file trespass charges against your entire company." The foreman didn't argue. Nobody did. Within minutes, the bulldozer shut down. Within 10, their truck was tearing down the mountain as fast as it could without losing a bumper. And I stood alone, just me, a field of splintered wood, and a silence so deep it felt like the mountain was holding its breath. I walked the perimeter slowly, cataloging every angle, every impact point. Where the blade hit first, where the structure collapsed, where the foundation cracked under pressure. Then I crouched down and lifted what little remained of my watch. Bent metal, crushed cogs, mud in the gears. I wiped it clean with my thumb and slipped it into my pocket. Evidence. Nothing more, nothing less. I exhaled, staring at the ruin. They thought they'd break me by tearing this place down. But they didn't know me. They didn't know what I used to do for a living. They didn't know what waking up the old part of me would cost them. "This isn't over," I said softly. Not a threat, not a promise, a statement of fact. And the wind carried those words across the clearing like it agreed. I stayed in that clearing longer than I should have. Not mourning, just studying. When you've investigated enough crime scenes, you learn not to let emotion move your feet. Evidence first, pain later. The sun slid lower, throwing long shadows across what used to be my living room floorboards. I tightened my jacket and got to work. I started with the tire tracks. The bulldozer's imprint was clean. Deep grooves, left to right drift, consistent pressure, professional operator, experienced, which meant he knew exactly what he was doing. The truck tires were easier. Fresh mud packed in the tread, the kind you only get from the upper switchback trail, meaning they didn't come straight up the public access road. Someone had guided them through the HOA's private gate. I walked the perimeter, taking photos at every 15-degree angle like I used to train rookies. Wide shot, mid shot, close up, footprints, displacement, angle of debris scatter. Crime scenes don't lie. People do. Near the eastern edge of the wreckage, I found something interesting. A strip of caution tape flapping in the wind. Redwood Crest HOA colors, cut sloppy with dull scissors. I pocketed it. Then something else caught my eye. An indent in the mud shaped like a boot pivot. Weight shifted, toe dug in. Someone turned quickly there. Someone startled, probably when they heard my truck coming up the road. I photographed that too. After half an hour, the clearing told me everything except the one piece that mattered most. Why now? Veronica Hale had been circling my property like a hawk for months, but even hawks don't dive unless they see weakness. So, I started piecing the timeline backward. They scouted last night, confirmed I was home, pulled back, waited, saw me leave at 9 a.m., mobilized machinery, got access through the west gate, pushed the dozer up the mountain, flattened everything in under an hour. That wasn't impulse. That was a plan. And plans leave trails. I walked back to the truck and pulled out the folder the foreman had tried to hide behind. I spread the forged documents across my tailgate. Garbage work, wrong formatting, wrong font, wrong seal, wrong parcel boundaries. A rookie investigator would have spotted the forgery from 10 feet away, but one detail made me stop. At the bottom left corner of the map, barely visible unless you tilted it toward the sun, was a faint metadata tag, a digital timestamp from the editing software. 6:14 a.m. that morning. Fresh, rushed, desperate. Someone forged this hours before leveling my cabin. Someone who thought speed mattered more than accuracy. Someone sloppy. I took a picture of the metadata and marked it mentally as the first thread I'd pull. The second thread came when I opened the demolition notice again. There, stamped sideways along the margin, was a watermark from a print shop in town, a cheap place, cash only, meaning someone from Redwood Crest HOA had gone into town at sunrise, printed fake documents, and rushed them into the hands of a demolition crew. That gave me a window of time and a location to check. The third thread was the signature, Veronica Hale's name, clean, confident, too confident. Either she forged it herself or someone forged it for her with her blessing. Both scenarios worked for me. Both were crimes. I packed everything back into the folder, placed it gently in the cab of my truck, and stared out at the wreckage one more time. Most people, seeing their home destroyed, would run straight to the sheriff's office screaming. But I learned long ago, you don't walk into a gunfight empty-handed, and you don't walk into a courthouse without evidence sharp enough to cut stone. So, instead of driving into town, I drove to the ridge above Redwood Crest, a place high enough to see their entire layout, every street, every gate, every blind spot. From there, the HOA looked small, contained, predictable. I sat in my truck with the engine off, watching the neat rows of pastel houses below. Somewhere down there, someone had authorized a crime, and they thought they'd gotten away with it. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd used for years on the force, and began writing names, times, possibilities, and pressure points. Every investigation needs a starting point. For this one, it was simple. Find out who opened the west gate, then find out who gave the order, then follow the greed. Darkness settled over the ridge, and the cold crept in again. But I didn't start the truck yet. Because for the first time since moving up this mountain, I wasn't wondering whether the HOA would escalate. I knew they already had. And I knew something else too. If they were willing to destroy my home, they'd be willing to do worse. Which meant I wasn't just building a case anymore. I was starting a hunt. That night, sleep didn't come. Not because of fear. Fear's a young man's problem. It was the questions that kept me awake. Who signed the order? Why rush the demolition? What were they trying to cover before I even knew something was wrong? I've learned one thing in 20+ years of chasing white-collar criminals. People don't risk prison unless there's a payday big enough to make them stupid. So the next morning, just after dawn, I drove into town and parked across from the Redwood Crest HOA office. Same place I'd seen their security clown block me before. The plaza was waking up. Cafe opening, dog walkers, retirees waving at each other like it was Mayberry. Redwood Crest always looked harmless on paper. That's what made it so dangerous. I watched the front door for a while, staff arriving, board members strolling in with lattes, 2 landscapers unloading tools in the back, normal, too normal. Then a silver Lexus pulled up, sleek, spotless, driven by someone who'd never had dirt under their nails a day in their life. Veronica Hale, president of the Redwood Crest HOA, queen of pastel suburbia. She stepped out wearing a blazer worth more than my old service pistol, phone glued to her ear, talking fast, sharp, stressed. I cracked my window just enough to hear, "No, the developer wants confirmation by end of the month. Yes, we have to secure the ridge first or the bonus goes away. No, he doesn't live here. His parcel is unincorporated, but we can fold it into Greenbelt expansion if we push the paperwork quickly." That was enough. Enough to understand her motive. Enough to see the shape of the monster she'd built. Not greed, not pride, real estate money, the kind that turns decent people into wolves and HOA presidents into criminals. She ended the call, smoothed her hair, and walked inside like the world owed her obedience. I stayed in the truck, thinking. A developer deal, a bonus, a deadline. That explained the timing, the rush job, the sloppy forgery, the bulldozer waiting at the gate at sunrise. They weren't trying to intimidate me. They were trying to erase me. I took a slow breath, ready to drive out and start my next lead, when something moved on the passenger side. A knock on my window, soft, nervous. I turned. A woman stood outside, maybe mid-30s, holding a beige folder like it was radioactive. Brown hair tied back too neat, eyes darting like she expected someone to yank her off her feet. I cracked the window. "You're Michael Rivera, right?" she whispered. I didn't answer. She pressed the folder tighter to her chest. "Please, I don't have much time. I saw what happened on the ridge. I think they crossed a line." "They?" I asked. She swallowed. "Redwood Crest. The board, Veronica, all of them." I unlocked the door, motioned for her to get in. She slipped into the passenger seat and shut the door quietly, like she was afraid the dashboard might testify against her. For a moment, she couldn't look at me. Then she exhaled and opened the folder. Inside were printouts, meeting minutes, email screenshots, land survey drafts, some of them stamped internal use only. She handed me the first document, a board meeting agenda from 2 months earlier. Highlighted in yellow was a single line. Phase 4, Creek Ridge Reclamation. Secure parcels, E964, E972 before developer deadline. Prioritize immediate removal of unpermitted structures. My cabin was E971. I kept flipping. The next page was an email from the vice president to the board. "If we can fold the ridge into the HOA boundaries, the developer will pay the 2.4 M bonus. Needs to be finalized by the 30th. Do whatever's necessary." Whatever's necessary. These people said the quiet part out loud. I looked at the woman. "And you're showing me this because—" Her voice cracked. "Because I voted for it." She wiped her eyes, ashamed. "I thought it was just zoning cleanup. Veronica said it was paperwork, technicalities. She didn't say anything about demolition or forging maps or evicting people who weren't even part of the HOA. I watched her hands shake. "I didn't sign up for this," she said. "I thought HOA work was supposed to be community service, bake sales, pool rules, not this." "Why come to me?" I asked. "Because you're the only one who can stop her," she whisper said. "She told the board if anyone leaks anything, she'll blame them for the entire operation." Bingo. Fear, power, desperation, cracks forming in the foundation. I took a deep breath, closed the folder gently, and slid it onto the dashboard. "What's your name?" I asked. "Melissa." "Well, Melissa," I said, "you just became my most valuable witness." She flinched. "I don't want to be involved in a criminal case." "You already are," I said calmly. "You voted. You participated. But now you're helping uncover the truth. That matters." Her breathing slowed. Not calm, but steadier. I started the truck. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet," I said, "to go through all of this the right way." Because now I had motive, insider documents, and a whistleblower with buyer's remorse. And after years in law enforcement, I knew something with absolute certainty. When one board member starts talking, the rest start panicking. And panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy people are easy to catch. I didn't go home after dropping Melissa off. People like her always look over their shoulder. And people like Veronica Hale made sure they had good reason to. Fine, let them keep hiding in the dark. Because I was about to turn on the lights. I parked down the block from the Redwood Crest HOA office. Before stepping out, I opened a small padded case from the glove box. Inside was a wall plug relay device disguised as a generic surge protector, completely harmless looking, completely devastating to the right network. I clipped a laminated badge to my shirt, blue logo, Comcast Regional Systems. Picked it up years ago while working a fraud case involving ISP impersonators. Funny how useful old souvenirs become. I stepped out and walked toward the building with the quiet confidence of a man who belonged anywhere he decided to be. The receptionist looked up from her desk, startled but polite. "Hi, can I help you?" I flashed the badge, not aggressively, just matter of fact. Good morning, ma'am. Comcast Regional Systems. We're seeing upstream interference coming from this block. Could be a switch issue or a failing router. I just need to run a quick check on your network equipment. Her confusion lasted maybe 1 second. Then relief washed over her face. Oh, yes. We've actually had residents complain about emails not sending and glitches. Perfect. I gave a professional nod. Yeah, that tracks. Could be packet loss from a dirty node. Won't take long. Most people don't know a damn thing about network terms, which means they never question them. She picked up her phone. Let me see if Ms. Hale is available. Available or not, I said gently, I'll be out of your way in 10 minutes. If I don't get this cleared, it could cause outages across the neighborhood. Magic word, outages. Panic flickered in her eyes. She gestured for me to follow. Of course, right this way. She led me down the hall just as a door swung open. Veronica Hale stepped out, sharp as a razor blade in a navy blazer. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw me. Can I help you? I flashed the badge again. Professional, neutral. Ma'am, Comcast Regional Systems. We're detecting upstream noise from this building. I just need 60 seconds with your main switch. If I don't clear the interference, it could cause a cascading failure across your block. Her suspicion melted instantly, replaced by a HOA president's greatest fear, residents complaining. Oh, well, we certainly don't want that, she said. There's a network room down the hall. I'll show you. Perfect. She unlocked the door for me, routers humming, switch lights blinking, cable mess that looked exactly like every HOA I'd ever seen. Do you need anything? She asked. Just a minute, I replied. All I'm doing is checking for loopback errors. Again, technical jargon equals instant obedience. She excused herself for a scheduled call. The moment she was gone, I closed the door softly, knelt by the power strip, and unplugged an unused Glade diffuser from the wall. I replaced it with the relay device. A green light blinked twice, then stayed solid. Connection established. My off-site server, hidden behind several layers of legal obfuscation, was now receiving a full mirror of HOA internal traffic routed through public-facing ports. Nothing illegal, nothing intrusive, just listening, quietly, patiently. I tapped on the keyboard of their admin terminal, running fake diagnostics, triggering packet refreshes, giving the relay all the internal movement it needed to mirror. Then, a folder popped up in the mirrored logs. Phase 4, Ridge Reclamation, Confidential, and inside, 3 overlapping survey maps, 1 county official, 1 HOA draft, 1 blatantly forged. Timestamp, 6:14 a.m., the morning of my demolition. But the real prize was a memo labeled From V. Hale to board members. Ensure parcel E971 shows as community-controlled green space. Developer expects confirmation Friday. Remove prior owner references. There it was, the smoking gun. No, the entire smoking armory. Footsteps approached. I kept typing calmly, like a bored technician. A man's voice came through the door. You all good in there? Almost done, I answered, just clearing the noise. The footsteps faded. I unplugged the device, put the diffuser back exactly the way I found it, wiped the keyboard, and stepped out with a cordial nod. All set, I said to the receptionist. Your signal should stabilize now. Veronica reappeared, trying to look authoritative instead of anxious. Everything resolved? For now, but you should consider updating your firmware monthly. Old settings tend to create problems. She nodded. Grateful. Thank you. Let us know if we can contact you again. Oh, I said with a polite smile. I'm sure we'll be talking soon. She laughed. She thought I was joking. But the moment I stepped into the afternoon air, with the relay device tucked back into my pocket, I knew one thing for certain. The HOA wasn't just cornered, they were exposed, and they didn't even know someone was watching. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the HOA office. Too much adrenaline buzzing in the bloodstream. Too many pieces of the puzzle snapping into place at once. Instead, I parked behind the old ranger station overlooking Redwood Crest, quiet, abandoned, long forgotten by anyone except hikers and men like me who preferred shadows to traffic lights. I opened my laptop and tethered the relay feed, and sure enough, their internal network was already buzzing like a kicked hornet nest. Emails flying, flags raised, people scrambling. Panic has a digital signature. I've seen it 1,000 times. The first email came from the vice president. Urgent. Did anyone authorize an ISP tech visit today? If not, check internal cameras ASAP. I smirked. They had checked. But I had unplugged the diffuser's camera plug to make space for the relay. One small detail that killed two birds. They never saw who I was, and they couldn't prove the tech ever existed. The next email landed seconds later. From Veronica Hale, subject. This is not the time for mistakes. I opened it. She was rattled. We're under review by the developer. If any of you scheduled service visits without clearing it with me, speak up now. We cannot afford surprises. We cannot afford exposure. Exposure, a word guilty people use when they know trouble's coming. Then another email. Property owner E971 posted something online again. Check HOA watchdog channel. Residents are asking questions. I leaned back in my seat. That was intentional. 3 hours earlier, before heading into the HOA office, I had posted a simple update to my anonymous channel. A bulldozer doesn't show up by accident. Someone let it in. 10 words, no accusation, no blame, just enough truth to make liars sweat. And judging by their inbox, they were already slipping. I watched them unravel for another 30 minutes before closing the laptop. Then I started the second phase of my plan. Not hacking, not breaking in again, just psychology. People under pressure divide themselves. Some double down, some cave in, and some, the important ones, look for an exit before the ship sinks. Those were the ones I needed. So I drafted an email from a burner address. Short, clean, measured. You've been misled. You're being set up to take the fall. You know it. I know it. If you want to talk, meet me tonight. 8:30 p.m. Ranger Station lot. Come alone. I blind copied it to every board member except Veronica. Then I waited. At 7:55 p.m., the lot was empty. At 8:10 p.m., still nothing. I didn't expect anyone to come. People rarely jump on the first chance to confess to a stranger, but at 8:27 p.m., headlights. A white Honda Civic rolled slowly into the lot. Cheap, practical, belongs to someone who doesn't make HOA money. The engine shut off. A man stepped out, mid-40s, slight paunch, nervous posture, HOA badge still clipped to his belt like he'd forgotten to remove it. He looked around like a man walking into his own funeral. Are you the one who emailed us?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just nodded toward the passenger side of my truck. He climbed in, hands shaking. I shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Veronica will fire me if she finds out." "Good news," I said quietly. "She's going to lose her job long before she fires you." He blinked hard. Then his composure cracked. "You don't understand," he whispered. "She's blaming us. All of us. She said if anything leaks, someone else forged the documents. Someone else authorized the dozer. Someone else handled outreach." His breath quickened. "She's preparing to pin the entire project on the board. Bingo. Guilty people don't unite, they fracture. What's your role?" I asked. He swallowed. "I handled mapping requests, just the drafts." He loosened his collar. "I didn't sign off on the demolition. I swear. She said parcel E971 was empty land. Said the county messed up the registry. If I'd known..." He stopped. Tears welled. He wasn't a monster. He was a cog, and cogs crack easier than steel. "Listen," I said quietly. "Right now, you're not in trouble, but the people above you are, and they're going to use you as a shield unless you step away first." His eyes darted. Am I going to prison?" "Not if you tell the truth," I answered, "and not if you do one more thing for me." He wiped his eyes. What is it?" I slid a voice recorder onto the center console. "You're going to tell me everything. Every meeting, every directive, every time she pushed you, every time she told you to look the other way." He stared at the device, then at me. Then he pressed the record button. The confession lasted 20 minutes. When he finished, he exhaled like he'd dropped 100 pounds from his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. I didn't want to lose my house. She threatened us." "You did the right thing," I said. He climbed out, got back into his Civic, and drove off into the dark. I sat there for another minute, listening to the crickets. 2 board members down, a whistleblower and a confessor. Veronica might have still believed she was in control, but control is an illusion. And in Redwood Crest, that illusion was cracking. Fast. I left the ranger station around 10 p.m. Long day, longer night ahead. The mountain air was cold enough to sting, but I kept the windows cracked. Old habits. You listen more than you look when you suspect someone might tail you. The road toward my property was empty, too empty for a Thursday night. The first sign came near the old fire trail, a faint reflection in the ditch. Metal, maybe a license plate, partially covered with brush. Someone had parked there, recently. I slowed just a hair, didn't stop, didn't stare. Predators spook easy. A mile up, I saw the second sign. Fresh tire slush on the gravel bend, wide tread, cheap tires. HOA security liked SUVs, but this was a pickup, probably from the same crew who'd scouted my place before. Then came the third sign, the honest one. A black truck pulled out onto the road behind me, no headlights. That's not curiosity, that's intent. I kept driving, calm, steady, didn't speed up, didn't brake. Predators don't chase unless you run. When I reached the fork leading to my property, I made a decision. I didn't turn home, I turned right, down the old logging road. A dead end. To someone ignorant, it'd seem like I'd trapped myself. To me, it was a choke point, perfect for conversation. Half a mile in, I eased the truck to a stop. Engine running, hands resting casually on the steering wheel. The black truck rolled in behind me and stopped. Still no headlights. For a moment, nothing happened. Then two doors slammed, two silhouettes. Big enough to feel confident. Stupid enough to be here. They approached slowly, not careful, not tactical. More like guys who watched too many crime shows and thought walking wide-legged made them look dangerous. The taller one spoke first. His voice tried to sound deep. It cracked on the last syllable. "Evening, Rivera." I didn't answer, just lowered my window halfway. He stepped closer, breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "Bad time to be out driving alone," he said. "Lucky for me," I replied evenly. "I don't believe in luck." The second man circled toward my rear bumper, pretending subtlety. I watched him through the side mirror, hands fidgeting, scanning for cameras, nervous as a kid stealing gum. Amateurs. The tall one continued. "Boss says you've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Boss?" I asked. "You mean Veronica?" His jaw twitched. He wasn't expecting me to call the queen bee by name. "You need to drop whatever nonsense you're stirring up," he said. "You're making the board real unhappy. Tell the board they should have thought about that before committing 4 felonies." He blinked. "Felonies?" He laughed nervously. "Man, you watch too much TV. This ain't a movie." "That's good," I said calmly, "because in movies the idiots get dramatic. In real life they make tiny mistakes." He frowned. "What mistakes?" "Like," I said, "leaving your headlights off while tailing someone on a public road." His face drained. I tapped my steering wheel twice. A signal. The old logging road lit up in flashing blue, not police lights. My own truck lights reflected off a mirror panel I'd installed on the trees last year. Just a trick of angles, but one that made rookies panic. The second man jumped back like he'd touched an electric fence. The tall one swallowed. Who's back there?" "No one," I said with a hint of amusement. "But you didn't know that until I told you." Silence. Then I leaned slightly out the window. "All I want is for you to deliver a message." He hesitated. "What message?" "Tell Veronica Hale," I said, voice low as gravel, "that sending amateurs at night doesn't scare me." I paused. "But it does tell me she's scared." He stepped backward instinctively, predator-prey instinct twisting around. I don't want trouble," he muttered. "You already have trouble," I said. "You just don't know how deep it goes yet." I let the silence sit until it choked the air around them. Then, "You have 10 seconds to be gone." They didn't need 11. Both men practically sprinted back to their truck. Doors slammed, engine revved. Reverse lights flashed too fast for anyone who wasn't panicking. They tore out of the logging road so fast, gravel sprayed against the pines. I watched them disappear into the dark. Didn't chase, didn't follow, didn't need to. I'd gotten what I wanted. Proof that Veronica was panicking. Proof she was escalating. Proof she knew the walls were closing in. But most importantly, proof she was stupid enough to make mistakes under pressure. And people who make mistakes always leave evidence. I put the truck in drive and headed home, headlights cutting through the quiet trees. Tomorrow, the real strike would begin. Not in the forest, not on the road, but right in her own house of cards. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, because of clarity. The kind of clarity that comes right before you step into a room full of liars and hang every one of them with their own rope. Redwood Crest HOA held its quarterly meeting the next morning at the community pavilion, a glass and stone hall sitting proudly at the neighborhood entrance like a courthouse built for people who iron their pajamas. The parking lot was packed. SUVs, hybrids, luxury sedans, polished to mirror shine. People in pastel sweaters moved toward the entrance, clutching HOA folders like hymn books. I parked on the public street, locked the truck, grabbed my folder of evidence, and walked toward the building with the calmness of a man who had written his own ending. At the door, a security volunteer tried to stop me. "This meeting is for residents only," he said with the kind of authority only powerless men try to fake. "I won't interrupt," I replied gently. "Just here to listen." Before he could argue, someone else cut in, a voice sharp as razors dipped in honey. "What exactly do you think you're doing here?" Veronica Hale herself. She stood at the doorway like she owned the sunlight behind her, blazer immaculate, smile lethal, eyes calculating, then narrowing when she recognized me. "Mr. Rivera," she said, "you are not a resident of Redwood Crest. This is a private meeting." "Then it shouldn't concern me," I said, stepping past her, "unless there's something you don't want me to hear." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't stop me. That was her first mistake of the morning. Inside, the hall was full, chairs set in perfect rows, stage at the front, projector screen glowing with the HOA logo. People murmured as Veronica stepped to the podium, tapping the mic. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have several agenda items today, including updates on our long-term development plans." She clicked to the first slide, a map, a large one. Redwood Crest expansion, Phase 4, Ridge reclamation. Right over the area where my cabin used to stand. I stood at the back, arms crossed, waiting. Veronica kept talking. She smoothed, lied, twisted facts like taffy, and people nodded along like they'd been trained for years to applaud their own oppression. Then she said it, the sentence I'd been waiting for. "And despite misinformation circulating online, I want to assure everyone that all recent actions taken by this board were completely within legal authority." I raised my hand. She saw it, ignored it. I raised it higher. Someone in the second row turned, then another. Then 10 more. Within seconds, the room's eyes shifted toward me like gravity had changed. Veronica hesitated. "Sir," she said sharply, "as I've already stated, this is a resident meeting." "You should answer the question," I said, my voice low but carrying across the room, like thunder rolling under calm skies. "What question?" she snapped. "The one you just implied an answer to," I said, stepping forward. "You're telling this crowd that every action taken by this board was legal." "It was," she said through clenched teeth. "You sure about that?" Her nostrils flared. "I absolutely am." "Good," I said, stepping to the table with the projector controls. "Because I'd hate for you to claim later that you misspoke." I set down my thumb drive. "Play the file labeled Internal Meeting, March 14th, please." The tech assistant, unsure whether he was allowed to refuse, glanced nervously at Veronica. Her face froze. Too late. The screen flickered. A grainy recording began to play. Veronica's voice filled the speakers. "We take the ridge first. Erase the outlier parcels. Counties backlogged. They won't notice. Get the dozer in before anyone files complaints." The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, hands over mouths. Veronica lunged toward the podium. "That audio is fake. It's doctored. This is an attack on—" I cut her off by switching slides. A forged demolition order lit the screen, her signature at the bottom. Then the matching timestamp, 6:14 a.m., the morning of the bulldozer. Then a drone photo from my ridge showing the dozer tracks aligned with the HOA maintenance gate. Then Melissa's leaked memo. Developer bonus, 2.4 M upon securing ridge parcels. Do whatever's necessary. People turned on her instantly. "Is that your signature? You lied to us. You used our fees for this? What else have you forged?" She lost control in real time. Her voice shrilled. "Stop this! He is not a resident. This is harassment." I stepped forward, calm as stone. "Veronica," I said quietly, "you destroyed my home." Someone in the room gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh God." She pointed at me with shaking hands. You're just some man living outside our boundary. You have no authority here." I reached into my jacket. Her eyes widened. Half the room held its breath. I didn't pull a weapon. I pulled a badge, set it on the podium like a judge laying down a gavel. The room fell silent. "Captain Michael Rivera," I said. "Fraud Division. Clark County Sheriff's Department." Veronica's knees visibly buckled. "You committed document falsification, ordered an unlawful demolition, coordinated real estate fraud, and threatened multiple residents." The back doors opened. 2 deputies stepped in. Then my contact from the district attorney's office walked down the center aisle, holding a stack of warrants an inch thick. His voice carried like a church bell. "Veronica Hale, you are under arrest for fraud, falsification of public documents, conspiracy, and destruction of private property." People backed away from her, as if she were contagious. No, I didn't. I was protecting the community. This is a misunderstanding." Deputies cuffed her. One board member tried to slip out the side door. Another deputy stopped him. The entire leadership collapsed in the span of 2 minutes. As Veronica was escorted past me, she glared with pure venom. "You think you've won?" she hissed through clenched teeth. I leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "No," I murmured. "I told you last time, this was the worst mistake of your life." Her face broke like glass under pressure. Then she was gone. The days following the HOA meeting were strangely still, like the world exhaled after holding its breath too long. But the quiet didn't mean nothing was happening. It meant the machinery of justice was finally turning, and once it turned, it didn't stop for anyone. The sheriff's office took my evidence directly to the district attorney. Within 24 hours, warrants were issued for 4 additional board members. They were picked up quietly. Early morning, no sirens, no drama, just a knock, a badge, and handcuffs. The demolition contractor folded almost immediately. He admitted the cash payment, the rushed timeline, and the direct instruction to get it done before anyone can complain. He also admitted something darker. If the guy's inside, he's inside. They said he's never there. That changed everything. A bad demolition could be civil. A reckless one could be criminal, but knowingly endangering someone's life? That was the kind of felony that judges didn't forget. Meanwhile, the Redwood Crest community devoured itself from the inside. Residents stormed the HOA hotline. Meetings were canceled. Half the board resigned by email in the middle of the night, all of them using identical copy-and-paste language, like cowards who didn't bother writing their own alibis. Their office shut down the next day. Computers seized, paper files boxed up. Their bank accounts frozen as part of an ongoing financial review. People gathered outside the pavilion, the same building where Veronica once bragged about reclaiming the ridge. Now it sat behind yellow tape. Neighbors stared at it like a monument to their own blindness. A few approached me, some shook my hand, some apologized, some just looked at me with a mixture of shame and relief. Then came the hearing. I sat 3 rows back, close enough to see everything, far enough that she couldn't accuse me of grandstanding. When they brought Veronica in, she didn't look anything like the woman who once strutted around Redwood Crest like royalty. Her suit was gone, her hair limp, her posture shaky. She looked like someone who'd suddenly realized consequences were real. Her lawyer tried to spin a narrative, clerical errors, misunderstandings, delegated duties. The usual excuses of people who think signing their name to a letterhead makes them untouchable. The judge listened without a flicker of sympathy. At one point, she held up the forged demolition order. "This is your signature?" Veronica hesitated. Too long. Her attorney whispered frantically in her ear. "It resembles mine," she finally said. Not an admission, not a denial, just enough to satisfy the desperate instinct to not pick a side. The judge wasn't buying it. A screen lit up with audio from the internal meeting. Her own voice barking out instructions to erase the outlier parcels and move the dozer before anyone can file complaints. People in the courtroom gasped. Her lawyer tried to claim the recording was doctored. He didn't sound convincing. He didn't sound like he believed it himself. Then came the board confessions, stacked in orderly pages, each one worse than the last. Emails with her directives, drafts of forged maps, payment orders, threats sent to residents, and financial statements showing HOA funds being funneled into expansion projects that had nothing to do with community welfare. Her expression changed with each new piece of evidence. Anger, fear, resentment, then finally, pure desperation. The judge denied bail before the prosecutor even finished speaking. Veronica's knees buckled as they cuffed her again. One of the board members started shouting about immunity. Another tried to blame everything on a zoning subcommittee. Someone else claimed they were pressured by external partners. Nobody believed a word. And outside the courthouse, the fallout continued. The county announced a full independent audit of HOA finances. The developer behind the expansion deal immediately distanced himself, claiming ignorance. But emails said otherwise. Even if he escaped charges, his projects were frozen pending review. The real estate world treated that like a death sentence. A week later, Redwood Crest HOA officially ceased to exist. Court order. Stamped, final, irreversible. Their sign was taken down from the community pavilion. Neighbors gathered around to watch it happen. Some clapped, some cried. Some recorded it on their phones like it was a holiday parade. When the metal letters hit the ground, an old man patted me on the shoulder. "We all lived under that thing," he said softly. "Never thought it would fall." "It didn't fall," I told him. "It collapsed under its own lies." He nodded slowly, as if letting the truth settle into his bones. The scandal would take months to unwind fully, but the biggest battles were over. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think about the future, about rebuilding, about carving peace out of the ashes they left behind. And that final part, that's where the story ends. Or maybe where it really begins. 6 months after the courthouse doors closed behind Veronica Hale, the Ridge looked different, not because of what they tore down, but because of what I rebuilt. The insurance payout came through first, more than I expected. Then the civil judgment, enough to rebuild twice over. But money wasn't the point. It never was. I wanted the Ridge back, not the boards, not the nails, the land, the quiet. The life I planned to carve into that stretch of pine and stone when I first bought it. So I rebuilt slowly, not rushed, not desperate. I took my time the same way an old carpenter sands a piece of oak, methodical, patient, with respect for what came before. The new cabin rose on steel-reinforced footings. Taller, sturdier, clean lines, wide porch facing the creek. A hunter-green metal roof that pinged when rain touched it, just like I wanted. The sound wasn't just noise. It was a reminder, you survived this, and now the land knows it too. I mounted 2 cameras, one visible, one hidden. Not because I was afraid, but because vigilance is a habit you don't unlearn after 20 years in law enforcement. I carved a sign myself, from a chunk of cedar I found after the demolition, sanded it, burned the letters in with a soldering iron. Private property, enter at your own risk. Hung it on the pine tree at the start of the trail. A small reminder to anyone feeling bold. No one tested it, not anymore. Redwood Crest HOA no longer existed. Their records frozen, their funds seized, their bylaws archived under evidence. The community hired an outside management firm, stripped down authority, tight oversight, no power to touch the Ridge again. A few neighbors sent apology letters. Some slipped cards under my truck wiper. Some waved shyly when they passed me in town. I didn't hold grudges. They weren't the enemy. Fear and ignorance made them followers. Veronica just happened to be the one holding the leash. One late afternoon, I sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the sun tuck itself behind the tree line. The creek made its steady noise below, the kind that settles a man's heartbeat. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the bulldozer blade touched my cabin. Stillness, not silence, stillness. The kind you earn only after walking through fire and coming out with your boots still on. The land felt mine again, clean, quiet, steady. I didn't think about Veronica anymore, or Redwood Crest, or the courtroom, the lies, the forged papers, the screams in that pavilion. Those were chapters that closed themselves. Now there was only the Ridge, the cabin, the pines leaning in the wind, a place to breathe, a place to write, a place to start the book. I kept telling myself I'd finish one day, and maybe I finally would, because peace doesn't come when the noise stops. Peace comes when you choose it. And on that ridge, watching the last of the sunlight slide over the roof, I rebuilt with my own hands. I chose it.